Okay, so in the last video we looked at the nucleus and how everything actually is calculated with the global settings. So now we're going to look at how these things actually interact with each other. So to do that, I'm going to go into the nCloth shape, and this is where all the settings are at. And I'm going to start with the collisions. Now basically, you have a couple of different ways that you can set it up to how it calculates the collision. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the solver display and I'm going to click on collision thickness. You see how this turns solid yellow? That's going to be how it calculates collisions. The passive collider has the same thing, so I'm going to turn on its collision thickness. You can see how that turns yellow. That's how Maya decides how things collide, is when yellow hits yellow. Now you have some different settings in here. Right now it's set to face. That's why it's solid yellow. It's calculating the surface area of the space. Now you can also set it to different settings like vertex. You can see how you get little yellow spheres. Now vertex is the fastest to calculate because it's not using that whole surface area, but it's also not the most accurate. Now if I were to go to this guy and set him to vertex 2, now watch what happens when I hit play. See how you get that little popping in there? And it's kind of going through a little bit? That's because it doesn't have that solid collision of yellow hitting yellow. So some of it's going to pop through until one sphere hits another sphere. So when you're looking at your collisions, vertex is the fastest to calculate, but it's also the least accurate. Now you can also set it to edge. You see how we get these edges, and it looks like it triangulated that, doesn't it? Well, it's actually dealing with those springs I talked about. So it's making each spring yellow. Now this is a little more accurate to calculate, but it's also not as heavy as setting it completely to face. So what I normally do is I usually keep my nCloth object face, or actually even set this to vertex, and then set my passive collider to face. So now I know those spheres are going to hit something yellow. So now when I hit play, it's going to calculate pretty good because those spheres are always going to hit something solid yellow. So that's how Maya decides if something's colliding, is when that anything yellow hits yellow. That's pretty slick, isn't it? Now, just kind of on a side note, anybody that is a modeler, you know how hard it is to model folds, don't you? Well, look at this. This is accurately calculating folds. Ha ha ha. So think about that. If you wanted to make a tablecloth real quick, or you're dealing with clothing that you want some folds, just turn it into nCloth for a couple minutes, calculate it, delete history, and now you have those folds modeled into your geometry that you can go back and tweak a little bit. So just kind of keep that in mind. nCloth is pretty powerful, and as you can see, you can set it up relatively quickly. But for the collisions, you just want to keep in mind yellow hitting yellow. Now you have a couple of different settings in here too that are kind of basic ones. Do you want it to be bouncy? Do you want it to have friction? Do you want it to have stickiness? So there are a couple of settings in the actual collisions, but we'll look at these a little bit more when we get into the entire settings for the nCloth. So just keep in mind for the collisions, it's always when yellow hits yellow. And then you can actually change these depending on how accurate you need it to be to help speed up or slow down your system. So like I said, I normally keep my nCloth on vertex and my passive collider on face. Cool, cool. So that's a basic overview of the collisions.